This is not Bob Staunton, genius broadcaster and throat-clearing phlegm spitter. Are you intelligent? If not, then subscribe and like the Tommy Boyds Shrine YouTube channel. Is Jesus half Italian? It says so in the Talmud. Well, he turned bread into fish. Why didn't he make a pepperoni pizza? Or some spag bowl with garlic bread? No gelato either.
The Major Tom.
We've been expecting you, Mr. Boyd.
His is the worst voice you will ever hear.
Will he offer me his teeth?
The Tommy Boyds Show will teach you nothing. Nothing.
Always read the label.
Nothing but iniquity and wickedness.
You really bug me, then I'll say goodbye.
Morning. So Christmas is coming. Forget about the geese. Plenty of people's wallets are getting fat. We kind of lost a bit about the message of Christmas, haven't we? And I don't think we ever knew anything, really, about the real man whose birthday we're supposed to be celebrating on Christmas. So let's compare notes. Let's remind ourselves what we know about this man, and also speculate about what kind of a chap he might have been, what kind of a boy he was, what kind of an adult he was. We're not talking this afternoon so much about his message, just about what kind of a person he was. I mean, if you were to transfer this idea to, say, John Lennon, we wouldn't be so much talking about songs like Imagine and She Loves You. We'd just be talking about where he came from, what sort of a boy he was, what his Auntie Mimi was like, what sort of a house he lived in. And, of course, that does help you with John Lennon, doesn't it? Get some kind of a clue about where he was coming from with his message, which was his music. And I often think far too little attention is paid to the background of this man. Free call 0500 10 53 89. Jesus. What was he really like? Very little, as you know, is actually known for Burtonshaw about the fellow, except I think that we can say that the evidence is 100%. He existed. He's not a mythical person. And the bulk of what he was said to be up to, whilst he was said to be up to it, can be shown to be just about proven. So we know quite a bit about what he was trying to get across. But the question is, what sort of a bloke was he? Well, how tall was he? How tall is he in your own mind? Is he a tall fella? I've got a revelation for you, which I think will slacken your jaw. I've got something to tell you about the man's origin that I think you didn't know. When you hear about it, you will be genuinely surprised, and it will change your view about what he looked like, how he behaved. It will give you some insight into how he became the person that he has become. But just you tell me, what does he look like to you? Is he a blue-eyed boy or a brown-eyed boy? If you were to pass him in the street, what nationality do you suppose, if you were asked, you might think he was? Free call 0500 10 53 89. Was he a loud guy? Or an energetic? Or was he thoughtful, introspective, louche? Free call 0500 10 53 89. He's always depicted wearing a white robe, sort of ankle-length nightie almost. You hardly ever see him wearing anything else apart from the loincloth in which he's depicted when crucified. Free call 0500 10 53 89. So little is known about him, and yet we are often shown pictures, paintings, and sculptures of a man who is very, very handsome in a gentle way, and who's got that ginger beard, that red beard, the red hair, the blonde hair. He somehow seems to be blue-eyed. He somehow seems to have a perfect physique, the right weight for his height. He's a good specimen. But was he? Free call 0500 10 53 89. There are rumours, there are legends. If you watch the Rugby League on Saturday, you will have seen the man who is playing Jesus Christ on the London stage, standing in the middle of Wembley Stadium and singing Jerusalem. Jerusalem is a hymn based on a strong belief that circulated in Britain around about the Victorian time, that Jesus actually popped over here when he was a youth. Yes, he sort of came on a foreign exchange trip. Yeah, he visited Huddersfield. It's all part of the myth. Free call 0500 10 53 89. I have absolutely no hesitation in saying, and I'm sure you agree with me, that is deep you-know-what, put about just to strengthen the notion of the British Empire being sort of somehow receiving some kind of heavenly seal of certificate. Free call 0500 10 53 89. Jesus, what was he like? What sort of a boy was he? What sort of a man was he? Do you know what's known about him? Just 4 things for absolute certainty outside the Christian Bible. The Talmud, and this is where it gets interesting, listen to this, the Talmud, which is more than the Jewish Bible. It contains ideas, stories, thoughts, and history. The Talmud reminds us, and you're not taught this if you're a Christian, the Talmud reminds us that it wasn't a miraculous birth, immaculate conception. He wasn't the son of a virgin. He was actually the illegitimate son of a Roman soldier called Panther, Panther. Yes, like the gladiator. That's a historical fact. It's in the Talmud. You couldn't make it up, could you? Free call 0500 10 53 89. The Talmud records that he was something of a magician. He liked to do tricks. He ridiculed the wise and seduced the people, and he was hanged on the eve of the Passover. Free call 0500 10 53 89. Jesus was half Italian, and yet he was brought up in Palestine as if he was Jewish. So he would have, to put it colloquially, stood out a mile, wouldn't he? He was different from birth. He would have been treated differently. He learned to be different. He knew what it was like to receive ridicule and scorn, no doubt. Little changes, does it? Free call 0500 10 53 89. So he'd have been fitter and stronger and taller and better at sport than the other boys that he played with. Because, to be blunt about it, Jewish people seem to devote their attentions and enthusiasms to things other than sport, but not the Italians. They love their sport. Free call 0500 10 53 89 and are a fiercely competitive people. What was Jesus like? Now that we know he was half Italian, and now that we have such powers of deduction, given that we have so little concrete information about him, apart, of course, from the fact that he did indeed become a disciple of a man called John the Baptist, who worked out of town in the desert with his ideas and stories. He gigged, if you like, out of town. Jesus was like second on the bill to John the Baptist. When John the Baptist was taken into questioning and given a couple of years for whatever contact charge, well, it told Jesus to keep the extra. But he brought it into town, and he worked on the northwest shores of what's now called, I think, the Sea of Galilee, until eventually he, too, rather annoyed the authorities and ended up in a spot of bother himself. Terrible spot of bother, really, because, of course, he was executed inhumanely by the establishment, although it seems that the Bible even cannot agree on the last thing that he said. There are 3 versions. My God, why hast thou desertest me? Is number 1. Number 2, into thy hands I commit my spirit. And number 3, makes it sound like one of those weird telephone poles, doesn't it? It is finished. Free call 0500 10 53 89. He developed his own style. Although he knew the scriptures inside out, he worked in colloquialisms. He was a tabloid man, if you like. He addressed, instead of the learned and the wise of Palestine, he addressed the ordinary people, the C2s and the Ds, if you want to be demographic about it. And he had a simple message, which is that there is a God, but he's not somebody millions of miles away, a prisoner, isolated in his own majestic sphere, but somebody who actually is about to tap you on the shoulder. But what was he like as a man? What were his hobbies? If he played sport, wouldn't it have been tennis? If he'd had girlfriends, wouldn't he have had lots of on-off affairs? I mean, he would have been a terribly unpredictable date. If he'd had an alternative career, I see him as a tailor. What do you say? Lifestyle? I don't think he drank Monday to Friday, but he didn't mind a beer at weekends. Food-wise, he was Italian, but I wouldn't stoop so low as to suggest that he was a pasta man. You tell me. Free call 0500 10 53 89. Here's one last thought. If he was alive today, if Jesus was alive today, what would the Daily Mail newspaper make of him? I'll tell you, they'd say he was something of a threat to the establishment. What would the Guardian say of him? That he was something of an intellectual populist. And what would say the Daily Star say of him? That he was a gorgeous, pouting smoothie. Can we think of anybody on the British scene today who is seen as a mild threat to the establishment, an intellectual populist and a gorgeous, pouting smoothie, apart from Tony Blair? Free call 0500 10 53 89. With Christmas a-coming, Jesus He existed, but what do you think he was like? I'm Tommy Boyd. This is Talk Radio. There's a good argument for listening.
Talk to Tommy Boyd. Free call 0500 1053 89. 0500 1053 89.
Our first call on this one is Simon calling from South Yorkshire. You're on Talk Radio, Simon. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Tommy.
Hi.
I just wondered why, when children are at school or perhaps on Christmas cards, whenever it shows you Jesus, he never looks vaguely Jewish.
No.
He always looks European.
Yes.
A little bit wimpish.
He was Italian. The cat's out of the bag. It's in the Talmud. His father was a Roman soldier called Panther.
Not many Christians read the Talmud, Tommy.
Exactly my point. It's good to be first with the news.
And I just wondered if he probably would look more like Panther instead of the bit of the wimpy depiction, the long, greasy, dank hair. If he was a perfect man.
Well, they didn't have any hair care products in those days, did they? Didn't even have soap, so you would just wash it.
Wash and go.
Exactly. Wash and go in the sea. And, we know that the sea around that area was very, very salty. I don't know what salt water does to your hair, Simon.
No idea, to be honest, Tommy.
You've never swum in the sea?
No, not in the British Sea, anyway.
No.
No.
Thank you for your call.
Thank you.
Free call 0500 1053 89. That was Simon in South Yorkshire. Or, just in case you're in any doubt as to the Jewishness, if I can put it like that, of Jesus' family, his mother was called Miriam. We use the Mary. His father Joseph, and his brothers were Jacob, Judas, Joseph, and Shimon. And in one book that I've been reading, it says that alone is proof of just how dogmatically Jewish the family that he was brought up in was. And he himself was accredited the title rabbi. So Jesus was a rabbi, although half Italian, brought up in a very Jewish family. Free call 0500 1053 89. Andrew calls from London. You're on Talk Radio, Andrew. Good afternoon.
Hello. Yes, Tommy.
Hello.
Actually, he was not half Italian, half Jewish. He was purely Jewish. Actually, everything about him was mentioned 500 years even before he came. Isaiah even mentioned the color of his hair. That he has woolly hair. He had woolly hair. That was how it was predicted. And actually,
his hair isn't woolly then. What would it have been if it wasn't woolly then?
It's not straight. Actually, we know that.
And who says he had woolly hair? Where does it say in the Bible? And the Lord did have woolly hair.
Like lambs in the book of Isaiah.
Well, when was Isaiah written?
Isaiah was written 500 years before he was born.
So where's the verification?
It was a kind of prophetic thing.
Yes,
and
but
actually everything was true.
Where is the verification of the fact that his hair is woolly?
He said his hair was like lamb's wool.
Where?
That's what he actually said.
Yes, in Isaiah, but where do we find out later that it was?
Where did we say that we found out it was?
Yes.
Well, it wasn't really actually said in the New Testament.
Well, how do we know that?
Actually, everything that was talked about him. But I just want to even get out of that, even that aspect. He was a carpenter. We know that he grew. He worked.
What did he make?
He made chairs and all those kind of normal household implements. He actually did.
Well, you say that, but I don't know what normal household implements were in Galilee
like
2,000 years ago.
Stools or wooden.
Are you sure he made chairs?
Yeah.
You don't see chairs in the pictures of the Bible. He's either sitting on the floor or standing.
Well, they did have chairs in those kind of civilizations of those times. They did.
They had mangers, we know. That gets a mention. But is there a chair mentioned in the Bible?
Well, chair, like a kind of a sitting, a stool or something like that. They definitely had those kind of...
Where does it say there was a stool in the Bible? You see, I'm not sure how busy a carpenter would have been 2,000 years ago.
And then
coffee tables,
They also built wheels for carts.
Wheels?
Yeah, wheels.
Where does it say that?
Wooden wheels.
Where does it say that Jesus made wheels for a living?
It didn't say that, but at least we are just talking about the times that he lived around. And actually, there must have been...
So you're guessing that he made wheels?
I am not guessing. I am actually saying that because I actually read history about the Jewish people at that time.
But where?
Under Roman rule.
Where? Which book did it say that he was a wheelsmith?
He was a wheelsmith. It's not that he's a wheelsmith. He was a carpenter, and the carpenters built wooden wheels.
Wait, but you're making that up.
I'm not making it up.
Well, where does it say it?
Civilization, Egypt, Rome, all the occupied lands of Rome, the Roman Empire. There was actual access to carpentry in terms of building wooden wheels for
Look,
carts.
this is very important. We know there were wheels then. And we know that Jesus is supposed to have been a carpenter.
Yes.
But you can't put two and two together and say simply because there were wooden wheels and he was a carpenter, he was some kind of like early quick fitter.
Yeah, but also, Tommy, again, he also built these things, hoes. You know the hoes that you use to sort of like cultivate the land?
A hoe?
Oh, yeah, a hoe, yeah. Those kind of things. Those
What
kind
sort of
wooden
hose?
implements.
What sort of hose?
The ones that you sort of attach to a cow or an oxen.
A hoe?
So, yeah, a hoe, and then you sort of like pull it around. They still use it in Egypt up to today,
Yes.
5,000 years later.
So what do you think would happen? Would a man come to Jesus and say, I need a hoe, please? And they check through the catalogue. What hoe magazine? What hoe magazine? What hoe?
But seriously, tell me, actually, the carpenters at that time, that's what they usually do, the household implements because people were agrarian, they also build those kind of things. But actually, and also again, no, I'm serious about this really, because Josephus, have you read about Josephus before? Josephus?
No.
He was a pagan that lived in the Roman Empire. He was a kind of reporter going around the Roman Empire, and he actually reported about stories in the eastern part of the Roman Empire, like the Middle East and all that. Yeah. And he actually wrote about that time, about Jesus Christ. And that time, Rome was at its highest, was at the most peaceful period of the Roman Empire. So he was able to go around the Roman Empire writing about people.
No, it wasn't very peaceful at home. The Romans, Pontius Pilate was a right so-and-so, you know. There was never a more cruel protector than Pontius Pilate. That's pretty well documented. That's why he got the boot. Rome, in the end, got fed up with him, because protectors are supposed to be quite liberal.
Well, but the thing was that at least in the case of, because Jesus lived between the periods of Augustus Caesar and Nero, actually, we know that period was very, very peaceful in Rome.
Yes, but not in Rome, yes, but not where Jesus was.
Where Jesus was, there was the old rebellion by Barabbas and all those kind of
things. Do you think Jesus visited Britain?
No, definitely not.
Well, how come
Britain
him
wasn't
then?
civilized that much then.
But you know the hymn, and did those feet in ancient time walk upon England's mountains green? Actually, it's not Scotland, and he never got to Wales. So
in fact, the only place where the Bible mentions about Britain, which was known as Tarshish, was Cornwall, because they used to produce tin there, and a lot of the ancient civilizations used to buy tin from them.
Hence the woolly hair.
But I just want to say one thing, Tommy, please. He actually grew up also with Judas, you know?
Yes.
The one that sort of like betrayed him. They were sort of like...
What do you think they did when they were boys?
Well, at least they played around.
What sort of things did they do? Do you think they mucked about?
That kind of thing. They did all things that normal boys did, like playing around,
break windows.
Friends. Because at least we know that Jesus was a very friendly person. He had friends like Mary and Martha, and purely on the spiritual.
Yes, I know all that, but what did they do? That's what I want to know. I mean, what marked him out? Was he somebody who was going to end up like he has, responsible for a religion?
He was born to die. He knew that he was.
When he was 7?
Yes, he knew it's a spiritual thing. He knew. He just knew it.
He did.
He did. And also one more thing, Tommy.
Well, this makes it 3 more things, but I don't care.
You know, his brother, Jude, he had a junior brother known as Jude.
Yes.
He was actually, he didn't believe in what Jesus was doing at that time. I'm a Christian. He didn't believe what he was doing. It wasn't until he was crucified on the cross that his eyes opened that this man was really different from every other kind of man.
Yes, Andrew, thank you very much indeed for your call. The question we're asking, the thing we're trying to find out about is what sort of a bloke was he? You see, the difference nowadays is that if anybody came along and were able somehow to persuade a third of the world's population that they had an important message to deliver, they would be subjected, wouldn't they, to such utter scrutiny that, you know, we would know the colour of their nose hair, we would know what they sounded like so intimately, we would dream about them and we would be able to recognise them in our dreams. But you can't get a handle on this man for all the good that he has done, and maybe the harm that other people have done because they got his message wrong. We still don't know what he was like. You know, he wiped his nose. Same as everybody else. Went to the loo. Same as everybody else, you know. But what was he like? What's he like in your own mind? Free call 0500 10 53 89. Especially now that you know, perhaps for the first time, that he was Italian. I'm Tommy Boyd. This is Talk Radio. There's a good argument for listening.
This is Talk Radio, the nation's interactive station. Recall 0500 1053 89 now.
Jesus Christ, the man. What did he read? What was he like? Alan calls from London. You're on Talk Radio, Alan. Hello.
Yeah, hi there. Firstly, I'm Jewish, and I've been listening to what you've been saying, and I've read a bit of the Talmud. Not a lot of it, but I've read enough to understand about Jesus the man. And now, firstly, It says in the book of John, I'm not too sure which chapter, but it says in the book of John, and one of the most important things is it says that there will come a Messiah that will come from the house of David. And the Christian belief is that Jesus came from the house of David as a prophecy that was done in the book of Isaiah. Now, if you like you saying it, that Jesus came from a Roman century, the Roman century definitely wasn't Jewish, and that means that Jesus couldn't have been the Messiah because, no, he didn't come from the house of David.
Well, his mum might have done. Miriam could have been from the house of David.
Yeah, but the house of David was a line of kings, like the Levites and the Kohanim. And the Levites and the Kohanim in the house of David would come through the man, through the father.
Right, I'm with you.
And that's the first thing. And
now, it was terribly important to the Gospels, wasn't it, that Jesus was part of the house of David? That was why they couldn't quite agree on exactly how it was, but they had him born, or at least something to do with, Bethlehem, because that was David's hometown.
Yes, that's the first thing. Secondly, they talk quite categorically in the Talmud about, is it possible for a woman to be born, for a child to be born with an immaculate conception? Is it possible for a virgin to give birth? And the Talmud goes into quite categoric detail about this,
yes,
as does it with everything else. And basically, when the rabbis got down to it, they said, yes, it is possible.
I think all of us would tend to agree with that, Alan, but have you got the bit where it says that Jesus was the illegitimate son of a Roman soldier called Panther?
No, I haven't got that. But all I do know is that basically there was 101 different things. There's 17. It says in the book of Isaiah that the Messiah, Jesus, was supposed to, or the Messiah was supposed to come as a king to the Jews. He was supposed to come as a Messiah. And when Jesus came down, he didn't fulfill very many of the prophecies that were prophesied in the time of Isaiah. And in the Talmud, it talks about the prophecies. It talks about the life of Jesus and the times of Jesus. It talks about Josephus as well, who the caller was talking about before. And it talks that the Talmud, I think, was written in about 70 A.D.
Okay, Alan, I'm grateful for your call. It's not so much about the Talmud, it's about the bloke. What was he like? It's not so much a historical exercise, this, as really one of inspired imagination, based on what you can perceive of what we now know about what life is like, what life was like then, and what people are like now. He had loads and loads of brothers and sisters, at least 4 brothers, and several sisters. So he was one of a family of maybe a dozen or more. I'm not clear where he was. If he was the eldest, that's one thing. If he was the middle, that's another. He'd have been ignored. If he was the youngest, he'd always have been treated like a baby. But apparently he was unique in that he was half Italian, according to the Talmud. And that would explain an awful lot, wouldn't it? Free call 0500 10 53 89. John calls from Manchester. You're on Talk Radio, John.
Afternoon, Tom.
Afternoon, John.
In the catacombs below Rome, there's the earliest known painting of Christ, and it's the only one done where the artist could have possibly actually met the man, because it was done within 20 years of his death, or at least had access to people who'd met him. And he's depicted on that as a tall, well-built man with a warrior's crop. His hair is cropped down short.
Is that right?
And if you see that painting, Tom, I said to you, who is that on it? You will probably say Vinnie Jones.
Thank you, John. Free call 0500 10 53 89. Good work. Mike calls from Suffolk. You're on Talk Radio, Mike.
Afternoon, Tommy.
Good afternoon.
I've heard you speaking on this sort of subject in the past, and I think you should become a lay preacher.
Well, no, look what happens to them.
Well, no. What I'm referring to is that I think you probably do make more people sit up and think about the subject that you're talking about than most other people.
Well, I'm a journalist. I'm only interested in the truth.
Well, yeah, no, that's very true. I mean, whether we agree with you or whether we disagree with you, at least it makes us sort of think things over. I mean, I've heard you sort of quoting sort of half-read bits of the Bible in the past, and, you know, I sort of stand and do my work, and I sort of listen to you and think, well, maybe I should think a bit more sort of deeply about what I consider to be the truth of the matter.
Well, that's nice.
And as
thing for you to say, but what was he like, Jesus?
Perfect.
Perfect?
Never committed a sin. The only person ever never to commit a sin.
Yeah.
Otherwise, none of his other work would have ever been necessary. Would have been able to be done.
You thought all that flannel and you'd fly that past me, didn't you? Get off. He was a bloke.
He was perfection. Never committed a sin. The only person never to.
Rubbish.
He was the Son of God.
That's cobblers and you know it. You're an intelligent man. Get off. Come on.
He was the Son of God and he was perfect.
He wasn't the Son of God. He was a bloke. He had a jolly good idea.
He wasn't the Son of God. He is the Son of God.
Well, he isn't.
He is.
Come on, get real.
Well, there's no point in arguing with you. I mean, I stand here and you make me think about what I think about.
Yes.
That's right.
Yes.
There's no point in arguing. If you've got 100 Christians in the same room together, I don't suppose you're getting to agree. It's like Scott Chisholm's little statement about accountants. So, there's not a question of arguing, it's a question of in your own mind. I mean, you've got the nation, or as many in the nation listening as do.
Did he go to the toilet?
Eh?
Did he go to the toilet?
I'm sure he did.
And he did perfect poo?
But he never committed a sin.
I'm talking to you. I'm trying to get you to understand that he was a man, because he was.
I know he was a man.
Did he have sexual desires?
More than likely.
Were they ordinary or abnormal?
I wasn't inside his body.
I'm asking you to speculate on what you know. After all, he was perfect. So what's a perfect sexual desire?
The devil took him up to a mountain and he tempted him.
Shut up. What's a perfect sexual desire?
For the one that I have.
Which is what? You and Jesus have the same sexual desires?
Very hot-blooded.
Well, what? Explain.
I don't know. I wasn't inside his body.
No, I know you weren't, Mike. None of us were. But we can still have this hour. You're saying he was a perfect man?
Yeah.
So what were his perfect sexual desires?
What's the point of me speculating on that? Because there's going to be two different types of people who are going to cause an argument over his sexual desires.
The problem you've got, you see, is that you can't even begin to substantiate this little...
Well, there's not any point.
Excuse me, I haven't finished. You can't even begin to substantiate this all-important hope that you have. And you can stick with it if you want to, but you're in a dark room with the door shut. And it's just as warm out here in the sunlight. He was a bloke. He had some very interesting things to say, but he wasn't any better than you.
He was.
No, he wasn't.
He was.
No, he wasn't.
He definitely was.
No, sir, he wasn't.
He was. He was perfection.
All right, bye-bye, Mike.
Goodbye.
Poor man. That's silly, isn't it? Didn't even begin to talk about Jesus the bloke. What sport would he have played if he played sport? For some reason, I see him as a tennis player. Or possibly a swimmer. I can't see him playing any of the team games. I don't know why. Even if he was here today, he would not have played rugby or football. I don't know why. He may have played cricket, but again, I don't see that. And what sort of food would he have preferred if he'd had time to choose from a menu? Again, I see him as dining light. I don't know why. He had other things on his mind. Was he serious or light-hearted? Well, of course, he was both, because you can be both. Free call 0500 10 53 89. On a chat show, he would definitely have been at least second bill. If they had someone over from Hollywood, of course, they always get top billing. But on Tuesday night, he'd probably have been the last guest. Free call 0500 10 53 89. Gary calls from London. Gary, you're on Talk Radio.
Hi, Tommy. You're completely wrong. He wasn't a man, he was a god. And his dad sent him down because he'd heard that there was a strict educational polity on the earth and there was other gods there to mix with. He was ahead of his time, a free thinker. He was Victorian values long before the Victorians came about. And decided to send him down to be educated here, but he was a god with all the powers of a god.
Really?
And that's what got him into trouble.
Fantastic, isn't it?
He actually had a pub crawl one night.
Yes.
He was invited out with Lockie and Bacchus, which should have warned him from the start. He ended up with drunk, and he woke up in an embarrassing situation, as a lot of people do, nailed to a tree and half naked.
Nailed to a tree.
And unfortunately, the Catholic religion had to hush this up. And
other histories do say that he was stoned, not crucified.
Well, he probably was stoned.
I knew you'd pick up on that, and I'm very grateful to you. So you are concentrating. That's nice. But one of his brothers was stoned to death using large rocks.
Yes. Sorry, I missed that. Who was stoned to death?
One of his brothers, Judas, was stoned to death. I think it was Judas.
Well, they weren't his real brothers. You see, as I say, he was a god, so he had parents that he, went with digs with. So he needed some place to stay, but he actually came down. He was a bit of a naive god, unfortunately. He was young, as we all are.
Do you think the Europeans would have taken to him as readily as they did if they had known that he was Italian?
Oh, certainly.
The Spaniards?
Yes.
Are you sure? I don't think so.
Well, he wasn't as hot-blooded as some of the other gods, so that is true. He did tend to be a little bit quiet.
But he would have had to develop terrific powers, social powers. He would have had to have become a great survivor if he was not going to be an outcast amongst his fellow schoolmates in Palestine 2,000 years ago, looking no doubt as different from them as he did, being half Italian.
Well, the problem with it is he should have been able to use his powers. Most of the other gods were fine. I mean, they were a bit funny-looking occasionally, and, Bacchus was fat and, well, it was just basically nothing to look at. But they weren't forbidden from using their powers. Unfortunately, he had a Victorian father who didn't like him showing off and using his powers, and unfortunately, he had to go through a little bit of trouble. I mean, when he woke up, nailed to that piece of wood, and he's done the first thing that many, many people have done when they wake up in that situation and they've just got a hangover, and the first thing, as his last words was, "Oh, God."
It's Gary in London. Jean calls from Lancashire. You're on Talk Radio. Jean.
I'm ringing it where it says in Isaiah 53, where Jesus was nailed to the cross.
Oh, yes.
And it says that God chose that plan for him, that route. It says, surely he took up our infirmities and carried our sorrows, yet we considered him stricken by God, afflicted by God, but he was pierced for our transgressions, and he was crushed for our iniquities. And the punishment that was on him brought us peace, and by his wounds we are healed.
That will do you a lot of good when you get up there, Jean. But for the meantime, how tall do you think he was? What sort of physical character do you think he was? Big guy? Big guy?
I'd say he was big, muscly.
Muscly big?
Yeah.
What,
but
5'11", 6?
Maybe 6 foot.
Because that's quite big in those days.
It is.
5'4" was about the average height.
But yet, he was so meek and humble, yet big.
Well, he'd have to be, wouldn't he? Because when he was a boy, being half white, you see, half Caucasian,
yeah,
he would probably have stood to get a beating, wouldn't he, if he'd shown off?
That's right, yeah.
So he learned to keep his head down when he was small.
He did. He said he was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrow and familiar with suffering.
Do you suppose that was because he was half and half?
No, I reckon it's because he came to tell the truth and people don't like the truth.
Well, that's, of course, assuming that he suddenly invented or developed powers of telling people the truth in ways that they rather liked. Because
he demonstrated...
No, hang on. He got very popular, didn't he, with the Great Unwashed towards the end of his
that's it. You see,
career.
God came to save the lost. You see, there's so many people who are religious who think they've got everything. When Jesus came, he says it's the people who are sick who need a physician, not the well. And he came to those who society rejects.
Can I bring Sandra into the conversation? Sandra's calling from Sheffield. Sandra, are you there?
Hey.
Hello.
Hi.
Sandra, say hello to Jean.
Hi, Jean. Hi.
Sandra, what have you got to say about... Jean's just been quoting us some of the information about Jesus.
I just think it's one of the biggest cons going. I really do. I think it's... I think Mary probably had a one-night stand or something, conned Joseph into thinking that she was carrying the Son of God, and then Jesus has conned everyone else. I think it's a big con. I think it's mad.
Bit of a con, Jean.
I think it's a con. Do you not have a relationship with God?
No.
No. Do you believe in him?
No, not at all.
No?
No.
I believe there's something, but I think that to believe that there's this bloke sitting up there saying, ruling everything, I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. See, I believe that he's here on us by Spirit helping us. See, when he died and he rose again, when he died, people thought
that's explain all the suffering and all the problems everyone's got. And
yeah.
It's ridiculous.
See, what happens is, when the people suffer, everybody instantly says, oh, that's God's fault. But nobody ever says that's the devil's fault. You see,
so you got a devil as well, Sandra.
Oh, yeah. The Bible says...
Where does he live again, Jean?
The devil?
Yes.
Well, he roams the earth. It says in the Bible he roams the earth.
What does he look like, in case I'm out tonight?
Well, don't be fooled by his arms and his tail. He hasn't got those.
What does he look like, then?
He looks just like an ordinary person.
What, is there just one of them?
No, he's got demons.
How many's he got?
Legions and legions. Thousands upon thousands.
All right, on my train tonight, there's just over 1,500 people. Yeah. Approximately how many of them could be devils?
That depends. That depends on them. It's whether they allow him.
No, I'm talking about the proportion of devils to human beings.
Yeah. A third... The devil took a third of the angels from heaven when he fell.
Yeah, I know, but how many was that?
It doesn't say in the Bible.
Well, how many do you imagine it was?
I don't know, because it doesn't say.
Do they have babies, devils?
No, they don't.
They don't? So
No.
it's the same number of devils as came down then?
Yeah.
And is there an even chance that one of the men on the train home tonight could be a devil?
Not a devil as such, but he could be possessed if he's allowed the devil in.
A demon?
Yeah.
Right, that's a demon, is it?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a 50-50 chance. So 1 in 1,500 men could be demons.
Could be 1,500 men demons. It depends who you're with.
Right. Thank you very much indeed, Jean. It's great. It's amazing, isn't it, Sandra, really?
Yeah.
If you ask me. You know, because, I mean, we're nearly at the millennium now.
I just think it's crazy.
I know. Still, I mean,
12 weeks, 2 years, and 4 years.
Okay, look, I can ask you this question then. soon the eldest is going to ask you what happens when you die.
Mm-hmm.
What will you say?
Because
they do.
I don't know. But I
Good luck
won't...
with that one. Good
I
luck.
won't say about heaven and stuff.
No.
No, because I think it's up to them to make their own mind up when they're old enough to understand it.
Yeah.
Instead of brainwashing them with it.
Right, so go on then, all right. Then they usually ask about when the budgie dies, usually.
When the budgie dies.
Yeah, they ask what happened.
I say he's gone to sleep and he's not going to wake up.
And you're going to say that to them, is what happens to them.
Well, I don't... But as I get older, it's easier, isn't it? I mean, you can't...
If they ask you tomorrow...
Oh, I don't know.
You can't say, I don't know. Your mummy. Your mummy. What do you say?
I'll just say they've gone to sleep for a long time. That's all I'd say. I don't know, because it depends what questions they ask back, doesn't it? I mean...
You don't know, do you?
No.
But you won't be able to say, I don't know. That's the tricky one for people who don't buy the idea of wings and halos. But on the other hand, suspect, you don't know enough to be sure one way or the other, which is a good way of being, I think. I'll let you get back to them. You get your hands full, I imagine.
All right, then.
All right.
Bye.
Right, one last question. She's gone. If he was a con man, do you think he was a good-looking con man? Because good looks, I mean, they carry you a long, long way, don't they? In anything. It's good to be good-looking. Free call 0500 10 53 89. We're talking about Jesus. We're about to raise a glass to him on his birthday again, and it will be a big thing. It'll last for about 6 weeks, the build-up. But what was he really like? I mean, what would he have liked as a present, for example? Free call 0500 10 53 89. I'm Tommy Boyd. This is Talk Radio. There's a good argument for listening.
Boyd. Free call 0500 1053 89. 0500 1053 89.
Brian calls from Glasgow. You're on Talk Radio, Brian. Good afternoon.
Hi, Tommy. Jesus was a short man. Extremely short, about 4'10". He bore more resemblance to Quasimodo than he did Robert Powell, I believe. So I've read. Another couple of logs to throw in the fire. He was actually a devout Jewish revolutionary. King of the Jews is more apt than Jesus the Messiah. When he went up to get crucified, it was a choice between Barabbas, whose first name is also Jesus, because Jesus was a very common name in the time. Barabbas meaning, at the time, in that language, Son of God, whom they chose to set free. They crucified the King of the Jews, who was Jesus, that we know. He was a direct descendant to Daglabir.
But this doesn't give us any handle on the man, Brian.
Oh, a wee handle on the man.
Yeah, that's what we want. We want to get a mental picture of him. We want to be able to know if we meet him in the pub tonight, we want to be able to know and walk up and tap him on the shoulder and find out what sort of a guy he was. And everybody who knows a bit about the Bible just quotes all this stuff and nonsense about his, about his line and all the rest of it. But what was he like? Did he clean his teeth? Did he have all his own teeth?
I think he was a bit of a ladies' man.
Did he have all his own teeth? In your mind, in my mind, because I was brought up as a Christian boy.
Tommy, in my mind.
In my mind, he had a perfect set of white gnashers. And he never ever had dirty fingernails. And that's ridiculous, isn't it?
Oh, well, absolutely.
Now, does it make
in those days, Tommy.
Does it make any difference to whatever his message was? I don't know. But no. I like the idea that he was a bloke.
People are just getting confused between his message, which was to claim the throne of Israel, and Jesus Barabbas' message, who claimed to be a Messiah and the Son of God.
Well, I don't know where any of that gets us. I still wouldn't recognise him in the street from what you've told us.
Well, you would recognise him back in their days if he was speaking in a crowd, because he would be sitting on the shoulders of one of his disciples so he could be seen and heard.
Well, they weren't that tall in those days.
Yeah, and he was exceptionally small.
You say exceptionally small. A previous caller had him as muscular and just over 6 foot. Free call 0500 10 53 89. John calls from London. You're on Talk Radio. John, good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon. When will you do a programme on Muhammad and Buddha in a similar style, and I mean similar, if you did, don't you think a lot of Muslims and Buddhists would find it offensive?
No.
You don't?
Certainly not.
Well, I'm a Christian. I don't go to church, but I happen to be a Christian, and I find your program very offensive.
Well, in a sense, you are right. You do happen to be a Christian. You're a Christian because you were born in a Christian country. If you'd been born in India, you'd have been a Hindu. You'd happen to have been a Hindu.
I agree.
You've been born, in Feltham, you'd have been an agnostic like me.
Yeah, but you're poking fun at religion, you know. And in this country, the Christianity is fair game. You wouldn't do it.
I'm asking what he was like as a man.
You to do it.
No, I won't do it because I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why I won't do it. I'll tell you why I won't do it. Because not enough people know enough about Muhammad for it to be an interesting, relevant conversation. But it's a different. No, it isn't ridiculous. The point is this, John. Okay, nearly everybody listening, right, had, and here's a cliche, had Christianity rammed down their throats when they were little.
How many percentage of your actual audience do you think
had a Christian upbringing?
Yes,
at least 90%.
You know, I don't accept that at all. Maybe 50, maybe 60.
No, you're out of touch. It's the law of the land that there's a Christian service in every British school.
I live in London, and there's not much Christianity in London. You look at the churches in London; they're empty. The mosques are full.
Yes, that may or may not be the case, John. But you just simply have to acknowledge what I've just said as being the truth. I agree with you that not many people take it very seriously, even when they're at school. But the fact of the matter is that all British children are required to have a Christian upbringing.
Yes.
That's just the fact of the matter.
I accept that.
So do you see why it will be an even bigger challenge to the creativity of my team to devise an interesting program about Muhammad, because 90%...
No, but I just think you're poking fun at Jesus Christ.
No, go to hell, literally. That's simply such a biased, closed view. I'm asking what he was like as a man. What's wrong with that?
You don't think he was a great man, then?
I'm just asking what he was like as a man. I'm asking you.
Well, he was like you and I, wasn't he? He was flawed. That's why he came to Earth.
So why is that not poking fun at him?
Yeah, but the people who are phoning in are finding all sorts of funny things to talk about.
That's their privilege. It's a free country.
Yes.
See, did you know he was half Italian?
Well, that's absolute rubbish.
It's in the Talmud.
Well, I've never read it, and I've never heard it before today.
No, you won't, because you were brought up as a Christian, and it's inconvenient for him to be Italian.
Well, yeah. All right. I was brought up as a Catholic, you know, but I was never taught that.
No, well, you wouldn't be, would you?
It's amazing, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It did to me. I only found out today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know where they found that bit of news from, but...
No, it's not a bit of news, it's been a
lot of Christians.
Well, of course it bloody is, because people who were brought up as a Christian were brought up by...
from, though, that he was half Italian?
Looks like you. Do you want me to get all my research out?
Well, I mean, it would be interesting...
Well, you can come up here. Where do you live? You can damn well come up here and look at it with your own eyes, and then you'll probably say, well...
Okay, well...
You're just not interested in anything new, are you, you lot? Hey? If it doesn't reinforce the tiny little bunch of prejudices that you picked up when you were 7 years of age, it's got to be cobblers.
Prejudices in particular?
Of course you have. You're saying that something that you didn't know in advance must be wrong because you didn't know it before.
You wouldn't do the same program on Muhammad.
Now you're changing the conversation.
You know what would happen to your radio station if it did?
Hell with Muhammad, then. If it's good enough for Salman Rushdie, it's good enough for me.
You talk about the same way about Muhammad as you would about Jesus Christ.
I'm asking the question, what was Jesus Christ like? Why do you see that as
your radio station?
Why do you see that as a damnation to ask what sort of a man he was? Why do you see that as a damnation of anybody to ask what sort of a man he was? What are you frightened of, to discover that he was a bloke? That's all the question.
No, I'm quite prepared to accept that.
So what's the problem?
I'm quite prepared to accept what you say, but would you do it in the same way for Muhammad?
I've explained why. I've explained why it would be less relevant radio.
I mean, that's a cop-out. That's a cop-out.
What do you want me to say? How do you want me to damn Muhammad, then?
I don't want you to damn Muhammad.
Well, then, get on to the point, which is whether or not he was half Italian, our Lord.
Of course he wasn't. Don't be stupid.
It's in the Talmud.
Goodbye.
No, don't you go away. Don't you go away, you wimp. Complete and utter child. Closed mind, closed book, closed eyes, closed ears. Where does it say? I've got all the stuff in front of me. He's still listening, so I'm going to make sure he hears it. He's gone to the radio now. Hello, John, you're listening to the radio now. Let's have a look. Sources. Non-Christian sources. There we are. Okay. History of his life and work. Non-Christian. The Romans. In the Talmud, a compendium of Jewish law and commentary.
only a few statements of the rabbis, Jewish religious leaders of the 1st and 2nd centuries, come into consideration, containing mostly polemics or Jewish apologetics. They reveal an acquaintance with the Christian tradition, but include several divergent legendary motifs as well. The picture of Jesus offered in these writings may be summarized as follows. In the Talmud, the picture of Jesus as a man may be summarized as follows. Born as the illegitimate son of a Roman soldier called Panther. Now, that is in the Talmud. And that's that. It might be right and it might be wrong, but it's in the I'd like to have known that when I was 7. Thank you. That piece of information has simply been censored, suppressed. But across a third of the globe. I don't know why the Jews don't mention it occasionally, just at dinner parties. That'll put the cat amongst the pigeons. Jesus, whose Hebrew name is Jesu, worked magic, ridiculed the wise, seduced and stirred up the people, gathered 5 disciples around him, and was hanged or crucified on the eve of the Passover. And that's what it says in the Bible, in the Talmud. Let's give Rona in Kent the last word on this one. You're on Talk Radio. Rona, good afternoon.
Oh, good afternoon. I don't see him as being meek and mild at all. I see him as being very human, very flawed. Otherwise, there would have been no point to him being here, because he couldn't have had compassion for us. Also, I feel he was a rebel of his time. Hence, he stirred up such a lot of, compassion and such a lot of anger that, that's why he's still being talked about today. And also, really, I don't think it really matters whether he's Italian or whether he is Jewish. I think the whole thing is the story that he had to tell, and the fact that he did preach a better way of life. Whether that came from God or from him as a man himself, I don't really think it really matters. I think the fact is, basically, he was a good bloke.
I mentioned it to Moz D in reception an hour or so ago, and he said, that's interesting. That would have made him a Juventus fan. I'm Tommy Boyd. This is Talk Radio. There's a good argument for listening.
Interactive station. Tommy Boyd.
I had 5 minutes answering the phone calls from Leeds. Joan, you're on Talk Radio.
Hello.
Hello, Joan.
Hello, Tommy. I'm shattered, Tommy.
Good.
I usually listen to you. In fact, I only have 2 radio sets. They're both on this program
Right
all the time and through the night. And I was so saddened by what you had to say about Churchill. I think it was very uncalled for to run someone down so derogatorily. I mean, really, you didn't need to do that.
It's just the facts. It's just the facts, ma'am.
No, it isn't a fact at all.
Well, tell me what's infactual that I've informed you of this afternoon.
Well, if you had been around at the day of his funeral, the whole of this country...
I saw his coffin. What do you mean if I'd been around at the time of his funeral? I saw his coffin, did you?
Oh, only on the television.
Well, I was more around than you were then, woman.
Don't call me woman. You don't have to. There again, you see, you're so big-headed.
You see, but you came in with the idea that I was wet behind the ears.
No, I didn't.
Yes, you did. If you said if I'd been around at his funeral, and I was.
I didn't. I wouldn't listen to your program if I thought that.
Well, what's the point of saying if you were around at his funeral when I was?
I did not say if you were around at his funeral.
You were alleging that I'm out of my depth.
Pardon?
You were alleging that I'm out of my depth.
I'm not saying that at all.
You're saying that if you didn't see something, you don't know anything about it.
Insulting and shouting over people. You're not always right, Tommy.
Well, where have I been wrong so far?
Because you shouldn't speak so ill of a man who was a great man. Oh, you'll never be half the man he was, I'll tell you that.
Yes,
and I'd love to hear some other people who will say the same thing.
Well, now, you're just being... How could you, then? How could you?
Squirt compared to a great man.
A great man. I'm a greater man than he was.
Oh, my God, there you are. You've got a bigger head than I even thought.
Well, you haven't read what I've read about him.
Haven't I?
No.
Have you read the works of Churchill?
If he'd had... Yes.
Well, then.
What do you mean, well, then? Have you? What have you read by Churchill?
The volumes in the past.
Which volumes of the past? Name the books.
I can't think of them offhand now.
How about the history of the Second World War? That's a good starter. That'll keep you going for a fortnight.
Oh, shut up, you little twit.
There, you see. Gone.
This is definitely not Bob putting a funny voice on. Click like and subscribe to the Tommy Boyd Shrine YouTube channel, and we may get more Bob Staunton. Now, if you'll excuse me, I am going to stick laxatives in Tommy Boyd's coffee. If he won't call it quits, I'll make him strain with the squits.